On July 4, 2026, as the United States prepared for its 250th anniversary celebrations, Pope Leo XIV embarked on a starkly different journey. Instead of Washington, D.C., his destination was Lampedusa, a small Italian island synonymous with the harrowing migrant crisis. This wasn't just a symbolic gesture, it was a deliberate, calculated move by the leader of over 1 billion Catholics, an American himself, to highlight a global humanitarian and economic catastrophe. The decision immediately ignited a firestorm, interpreted by many, including a Vatican official, as a direct rebuke of President Donald Trump's stringent immigration policies. Such a public divergence from national celebration by a figure of immense moral authority carries significant weight, impacting diplomatic relations and public discourse on economic policy. Lampedusa is not just an island, it is a crucible where global economic disparities meet human desperation. For years, it has served as the primary gateway for hundreds of thousands of migrants and refugees attempting the perilous journey across the Mediterranean to Europe. The economic strain on this tiny community is immense, with limited resources stretched thin by the constant influx. Local infrastructure, healthcare, and social services are perpetually overwhelmed, requiring significant financial aid from the Italian government and the European Union. Pope Leo's visit brought global attention not only to the human suffering but also to the unsustainable economic burden placed on frontline nations, challenging wealthier states to re-evaluate their financial responsibilities in this ongoing crisis. President Trump's immigration agenda, characterized by border walls, strict enforcement, and reduced legal immigration, is deeply rooted in an economic nationalist philosophy. Proponents argue these policies protect domestic jobs, conserve national resources, and reduce the financial strain on public services. The administration's stance views uncontrolled migration as a fiscal liability and a threat to national sovereignty. This economic framework contrasts sharply with the Vatican's humanitarian call for welcoming migrants, which often emphasizes their potential economic contributions and the moral imperative of compassion. Pope Leo's Lampedusa visit directly challenged this nationalist narrative, implicitly questioning its ethical and long-term economic viability on a global scale. The Holy See, while not a conventional economic power, wields immense financial and diplomatic influence. Its vast network of charities, educational institutions, and healthcare facilities worldwide represents a significant global economic footprint. Beyond direct aid, the Vatican's moral authority can mobilize billions in international funding, influence investment decisions, and shape public opinion, which in turn affects policy and market sentiment. Pope Leo's actions on July 4 leveraged this unique form of soft power to pressure nations on migration policy. By focusing global attention on Lampedusa, he implicitly called for a reallocation of financial resources and a re-evaluation of economic priorities by the international community, making a moral argument with tangible financial implications. The economic impact of migration is complex, often framed in terms of costs to host nations for social services, healthcare, and housing. However, the picture is far more nuanced. Migrants often fill critical labor shortages, contribute significantly to GDP, and send billions in remittances back to their home countries, bolstering developing economies. In 2023, global remittances surpassed $860 billion, a vital financial lifeline for millions. Pope Leo's visit underscored that the cost of migration must also consider the economic contributions of migrants themselves and the potential for greater international cooperation to manage these flows efficiently, rather than simply focusing on exclusion. The challenge lies in integrating these populations for mutual economic benefit. Pope Leo's visit also paid homage to Mother Frances Cabrini, the first American saint and patron of migrants. Born in Italy in 1850, Cabrini founded the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, establishing dozens of hospitals, orphanages, and schools across the United States and Latin America to serve Italian immigrants. Her work was a practical, financially demanding endeavor that addressed the social and economic integration of new arrivals. By honoring Cabrini, Pope Leo drew a direct historical parallel. The challenges faced by immigrants today mirror those of a century ago, and the need for organized support, often financially backed by religious and charitable organizations, remains paramount. Her legacy underscores a long-standing tradition of faith-based economic and social support for migrant communities. Another figure central to Pope Leo's Italian tour was Saint Augustine, the 5th-century philosopher whose work, The City of God, profoundly influenced Western thought. Augustine's magnum opus explores the conflict between the earthly city, driven by human desires and power, and the city of God, guided by divine principles. This philosophical foundation informs Pope Leo's worldview, particularly his critique of purely secular, nationalistic economic policies that prioritize state interests over universal human dignity. For Leo, the pursuit of wealth and national security divorced from moral considerations risks creating an unsustainable earthly city vulnerable to collapse. His actions on July 4 can be seen as an application of Augustinian thought to modern geopolitical and economic challenges. Pope Leo's July 4 decision was a masterstroke in geopolitical messaging. It positioned the Vatican as a leading moral voice against rising nationalism and protectionism, particularly in an era dominated by figures like Trump. This move could influence alliances, shift diplomatic priorities, and even impact trade negotiations, as nations grapple with the ethical dimensions of their economic policies. By explicitly challenging a major world power on its national day, the Pope asserted the Vatican's independent moral authority, potentially galvanizing international pressure on immigration reform and humanitarian aid funding. The financial implications are clear. A shift in global sentiment can redirect billions in aid, investment, and trade flows. The economic engine of migration is often overlooked in political debates. Remittances. These are the transfers of money by migrant workers to their families in their home countries. In 2023, low- and middle-income countries received an estimated $669 billion in remittances, surpassing foreign direct investment and official development assistance combined. For many nations, these flows are critical for poverty reduction, education, and healthcare, acting as a direct form of economic aid and stability. Pope Leo's focus on migrants implicitly highlights this massive, self-sustaining financial network, arguing against policies that disrupt these vital capital flows and further destabilize vulnerable economies that rely on them. The unofficial message from Pope Leo XIV on July 4 will have tangible, long-term repercussions. For the Trump administration, it represents an unprecedented public challenge from a global moral leader, potentially eroding domestic support and international credibility for its immigration stance. Globally, it empowers humanitarian organizations and nations advocating for more open and humane migration policies, potentially influencing future international agreements and aid packages. Financially, it could pressure governments to reallocate budgets towards migrant support, stimulate investment in migrant-sending countries, and foster new economic models that integrate migrant populations more effectively. The full financial and geopolitical fallout of this symbolic act is only just beginning to unfold. The Pope's July 4 defiance is more than a headline, it's a profound statement on the intertwined nature of faith, finance, and geopolitics. It forces a re-evaluation of what constitutes national interest versus universal human dignity, especially concerning economic policies. The long-term financial costs of neglecting humanitarian crises, compared to the potential economic benefits of well-managed migration, are increasingly clear. Pope Leo XIV has illuminated the hidden economic dimensions of a global challenge, pushing for a moral capitalism that prioritizes human flourishing alongside fiscal prudence. His actions demand that we look beyond national borders to understand the true financial and ethical landscape of our interconnected world. Remember that initial question, why did Pope Leo reject July 4? Now you understand the profound geopolitical and financial implications behind his deliberate, unofficial message to the world.